Hello, my name is Joyce Harper and I'm Professor of Reproductive Science at the Institute for Women's Health at University College London. And my latest book, called Your Fertile Years, is being published by Sheldon Press and is out in April 2021. Each week I've made a short video and written a blog about a different chapter of the book. And this video is about the final chapter, chapter 12, What Does the Future Hold for Reproduction? So what I'm going to talk about in this chapter is the possibility of making artificial eggs from stem cells, womb transplants and artificial wombs to overcome the need for a womb. And then I'm going to concentrate quite a lot on reproductive genetics. And this is something that I've been working on for over 20 years of my career. And I'm going to talk about preimplantation genetic testing, genome editing, and transhumanism. So in this video, I'm just going to talk very briefly about each of those points. Now, in chapter 8 of my book, I talked about egg freezing. And this is an option to overcome the issues that women have with the quality and quantity of their eggs declining with age. And I've covered the issue of fertility decline in women in many of the chapters of the book. So egg freezing puts our fertility on hold, but it's expensive. There are rules and regulations in different countries that restrict its use. But the most worrying thing is that it's no guarantee a woman will have a baby. So what if there was a technique in the future where we could make a woman thousands of eggs? As I said in chapter 1 of my book, a woman only ovulates about 500 eggs in her entire lifetime. So there has been a lot of research in looking at the use of stem cells to be able to make a woman multiple eggs. Now, you may have heard about embryonic stem cells, and I'll discuss that in more detail in the book. But the most exciting area, I think, where this could be a possibility is a certain type of stem cell called an induced pluripotent stem cell. Now, I'm not going to go into all the science of this, but basically, there is the potential where maybe we could take a bit of skin from a woman and the cells from the skin. We zap them with various reagents. They're called pluripotency inducing factors. And we keep these in culture and they will make this stem cell called the induced pluripotent stem cell. Now, once we've got an induced pluripotent stem cells, we could make all the different tissues of the body. So if someone was having heart problems, we could maybe make them heart cells. If they were having liver problems, we have the potential to make new liver cells. And with fertility, we have the potential to make them eggs and also to make sperm. And it may be possible for us to make eggs and sperm from the same person. So a woman could potentially make some sperm and vice versa. This is really being developed at the moment and is not possible, but in certain species, they have made induced pluripotent stem cells to make eggs and sperm. They've made embryos and they have made offspring, but it's a long way off in humans. We've got to be sure the technique is safe and it's not going to cause any harm to the future person that we make. But if it did work, it would be the biggest game changer in female fertility, because we would no longer be limited by the quantity and quality of our eggs. Let's go to the womb. Now, remember in my book, I've told you that the womb is quite a robust structure, and using a donor egg from a young woman, a woman in her 60s and 70s can still carry a pregnancy and give birth. It is dangerous to do that as you get older. There's many complications that can happen, but it is certainly possible. Now, womb transplants have been around for many years, and you think about all the different organs that can be transplanted. Why haven't we been able to transplant wombs successfully? Well, there has been a limit on the research because a womb is not an organ that's needed to survive. So obviously a lot of the research has been in transplanting organs that are needed for life, such as heart and lungs, etc. But it is possible, and a group in Sweden have done some really revolutionary work on this and had very good success in recent years. So it certainly is possible to do. And what they're normally doing it is between relatives. So that and this procedure has been really successful in their hands. But it's not easy and it's complicated, both for the donor and the recipient. And what they would do with a womb transplant is they'd obviously monitor the pregnancy a lot, but also they would deliver by cesarean section, because trying to give birth through this artificial womb could cause a lot of problems. But what about the future of artificial wombs? Well, there are some experiments that have been done in other species where they have managed for part of the pregnancy of various animals to use a bag, a special bio bag, where the pregnancy has survived outside the body. So if this did happen, and I have no doubt that all these things one day will happen, technology is an amazing thing, might not happen in my lifetime, but certainly there wouldn't be any reason, I don't think, why an artificial womb wouldn't at some point in the future, it might be 100 years time, be a possibility. And that would be a massive game changer. So I asked women who had had children what they felt about their pregnancy and giving birth, and they were all very, very positive. We all have ups and downs in our pregnancy. It's not an easy thing, and there obviously can be difficulties with birth, but it is something that that women value very greatly, and it's really one of those amazing things in life that some women opt to go through. So will we have a future where that is taken away from women and women no longer get pregnant and carry the child? So it's something to think about. And then I've been working on reproductive genetics since 1992. And so in the final chapter of my book, I will go through reproductive genetics in quite a lot of detail, because it's a really important area and it's really going to develop the future of reproduction. So there's a growing number of tests that we can do before a couple try to get pregnant. And one particular test is called expanded carrier screening. Then what I've been working on since 1992, pre-implantation genetic testing, where we can do some genetic tests on the embryo before it implants into the womb. And you've probably heard of non-invasive prenatal testing. This is where we can take the blood from a woman when she's already pregnant and test that to find out some of the genetics of the developing fetus. And then we've got prenatal diagnoses such as amniocentesis or chorionic villus sampling, which have been around for many, many decades now. And these are tests that also can be done. So there's a lot to think about with genetic testing and reproductive genetics. But I want to just look again on pre-implantation genetic testing. So I don't know if you've seen the film Gattaca. If you haven't, I think it's on Netflix. It's a film that's been around for many years. I can remember taking our lab to see this film. And it talks about a future where everyone reproduces, almost everyone reproduces by pre-implantation genetic testing. So with pre-implantation genetic testing, we can have the embryo in the IVF lab. We can take some cells from the embryo, and we are almost at the point now where we can look at all of the genetic code of that embryo, where we could then decide which embryo was the healthiest embryo that that couple had produced. And that's what happens in Gattaca. The genome of the embryo is sequenced, and only embryos that are free from the most lethal genetic diseases are transferred back. And this has health benefits and society benefits. You can imagine the NHS, if we didn't have genetic disease, that would make life easier for sure. And for society, we would only be investing money and education and jobs and careers in people who were genetically healthy. But there are many ethical issues that come with that, and I'm not going to talk about that in this video, but it's something that I talk about a lot when I give a talk. Besides looking at genes that cause health conditions, we could also look at genes that cause characteristics. So we could select, well, we could possibly select the most desired embryo with the characteristics that the couple want more. So for example, perfect pitch is just one gene. So imagine if we had some concert pianists that were carrying the gene for perfect pitch, and they only wanted to transfer embryos that carried that gene. Sporting ability is a lot more complicated. There's about 50 genes that we know at the moment related to sporting ability, but it would be possible where two athletes, we could have a look at the genome of their embryos and pick the ones that have got the best combination of sporty genes. And that obviously sounds a little bit against the grain. We're selecting embryos for characteristics which most people are not that comfortable with. But being devil's advocate, we spend money on our children the minute they're born with their education, their nutrition, etc. So there's a lot of things here for us to think about. If you had the money, wouldn't you try to only have children that are genetically rich, shall we say? So in the future, will we stop having sex for reproduction? Will people go through IVF? Will they then have preimplantation genetic testing, choose the healthiest and most desired embryo? Well, I don't think we're going to stop having sex for reproduction, but I think that it could be possible in the future that more people opt for this. We'll certainly still have sex for fun though, but it does make me a little concerned that when we're going to use this technology for less medical reasons. And then what happens next? Well, genome editing. I was very lucky to be part of the Nuffield Council on Bioethics working group on genome editing. And this is us here in the middle. And I have written some papers on genome editing and been involved in many debates. And in our Nuffield work, we concluded that there were two ways you could use genome editing. You could use it where there's a genetic risk within that family, but they have the option of going through preimplantation genetic testing or non-invasive prenatal testing or NIPT, as I've already mentioned, to check if the child has got the genetic disease. And then it's also possible to use this for genetic enhancements. So imagine that our couple didn't carry the gene for blue eyes or perfect pitch or sporting ability, and they wanted us to create embryos that did have those genes. So with therapeutic genetic interventions, we can eliminate the genetic disease from the family. As I said, they could go through PGT or NIPT, but with genome editing, we would edit the embryos before we transfer them and eliminate that disease. And with genetic enhancements, the same, but for characteristics. And I was involved with a Oxford University debate on genome editing. And the motion was, this House believes genome editing will undermine the nature of humanity. And you can find that on the Oxford website. So I also wanted to introduce a term to you that you might not know. It's called transhumanism. Now, transhumanists believe that the human race can evolve beyond its current physical and mental limitations, especially by means of science and technology. And that's really what we've been doing in medicine all this time. We've been trying to improve humans and prevent people from being ill or dying from certain conditions. But transhumanists want to take this beyond normal, what we would call normal medicine. But we're already doing that in some respects. For example, with diabetes, some people now have implants that they might connect to their phone. We've got artificial hearts, we've got pacemakers, we've got hearing aids, we've got laser eye surgery. All of these things are coming in, and we are definitely pushing human evolution beyond its current limitations. And I have taken part in a video with this group here. This was called Hacking Darwin, Genetic Engineering and the Future of Humanity. And you can find it on YouTube. And this was chaired by David Woods, who's one of the most prominent figures in the UK transhumanist movement. So is our future utopia or dystopia? In chapter 8 of my book, I talked about egg freezing. I've talked about preimplantation genetic testing in a few chapters, and I've now talked about artificial wombs. So if you haven't read Brave New World, I really suggest people read it. It was written almost 100 years ago, and it talks about a future where this is exactly it. We don't have sex to reproduce. We make all of our embryos in the IVF lab, and we put them in an artificial womb. And so we have gender equality, but is this where we really want to go? I think Brave New World will happen. I won't do a spoiler, but if you read the end of Brave New World, it doesn't all quite work out. So I think we need to keep discussing this with public debate. We need to think about the legislation. Many countries have legislation about what we can and cannot do in this field. And we need to very seriously think about the safety of any technologies that we bring in with regards to reproduction. So how will we make your children? And as I've said, I've covered many of these topics in the book: egg freezing, same-sex couples having children, surrogacy, we've got Gattaca here, Handmaid's Tale with more powerful women using less powerful women to carry their child, and Brave New World. The final words of my book say that I want you to understand how your body works. So whether you want to have children or not, your journey through your fertile years is healthy and happy. So I really hope you enjoy the book. It's going to be out any day now. And as usual on Global Women Connected, I have written a blog to go with all of these videos. And in the final blog about chapter 12, you can see the links to all the other videos of the chapters of my book and all the other blogs. So I really hope you enjoy the book. I would really love to hear from you of whether you liked it or not. And I'm really happy to come and do readings and discussions and Q&As and book clubs and go to bookshops and talk about the books. I really want the conversation around your fertile years to really take off. And ideally, I think we need to be discussing this within schools. And so I'm also really happy to go to schools and talk about all of these important topics. I want all of us to make informed choices about our reproductive years. Thank you very much.